Hello. So finally, I'm doing my first video for Blender. Um, I want to say some things that this is going to be kind of a quick, basic run through for Blender. The whole series will be this way. I don't have a lot of time to get into a lot of details, and I'm not an expert with Blender by any means. So I'm just an average person, an average creator for Second Life who happened to figure out the program on my own, digging for resources to learn. I am one of those who approached the program years ago and was terrified by what I saw and ran away from it for another year or two. But then I came back and just forced myself to find ways to learn it. And so that is the approach I'm taking to showing how to use it. I'm just going to keep everything in simple terms. It's not going to be a textbook series. There are people out there who have more in-depth tutorials and are more familiar with the program on a professional, technical level. So if that's what you seek, you should find those resources. They can be helpful. This is just for your average person who just wants a basic, preview of how to use it, and hopefully it will help someone out there. Okay, so given that, I'm just going to talk about a certain number of things and in this first video, and then, each video will cover more. So I want to keep it kind of really, really simple in this first video. I'm not going to jump into modeling anything yet. That's too much. My personal opinion on learning Blender and what worked for me is that before you can even get to modeling and feel comfortable with that, you have to get familiar with and comfortable with the interface and navigation, just simply using the program with your mouse and keyboard. So that is all I'm going to cover in one part in this video, and that will include, of course, downloading Blender, and I will mention Avastar, which is the plugin that can help with creating rigging and for like clothing, avatars, and also animation. And I'm going to go over some of the interface basics, and then I'm going to go over some of the navigation basics, which is like how to literally use your mouse and keyboard to do simple things, and also modeling navigation. So I will introduce some of the ways to do a little bit to the mesh, and also will be providing the shortcuts for those functions along with everything. So I also plan to provide a cheat sheet under each video I create for Blender, at least through this beginner's part of the series. So I'll put that in the description area for you to download and keep. So I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible and keep things as simple as I can. So if you have any questions on anything specific that I didn't cover or anything at all, just leave me questions or comments. But keep in mind that I don't have a lot of time to do this in a super polished way. I'm just trying to get this out there for those of you who just want to see what it looks like, get a feel for it, and at least be pointed in the right direction if you really are serious about getting into this program to create things for Second Life. Okay, so obviously the first thing that you will want to do is go to, in your browser, go to blender.org and download the latest version. I'm not going to use the release candidate here. I'm using Blender 2.78C, so that is what I have installed, and it's pretty simple, self-explanatory download and install process. Just click download, and like you would any other program, and download. Okay, once it is downloaded, just find your downloads folder on your computer, and over here, just open it like you would a normal program and follow the installation process. I have this already installed, so I'm not going to go all the way through, but just click next until you have it installed. So I'm going to exit out of there. And then once you have it installed, just find it on your computer in your programs list or wherever your programs store after they install, and open Blender. And there you have it. Also, I'm going to show how to get access Avastar, so I'll do that before we jump into Blender. If you go to this website, blog.machinamatrix.org, this is the blog for Avastar. The creator of Avastar has a few ways for you to purchase the program or the plugin. I bought it in World and Second Life, so I used Linden's, and if you click this yellow button, it will open a map to in-world in SL for you to go and do it that way. But you can also apparently use PayPal balance to buy it, and yeah, so those are the options to get Avastar. Once you do have the Avastar file downloaded to your computer in your downloads folder, I can show you quickly how to get that installed. When you're in Blender, you have your Blender screen open here. At the very top of the window, go to File, and then come all the way down to User Preferences, and then you will go to Install from File at the bottom here, and then you're going to find your Downloads folder on your computer. So mine is right here, and it will be listed in here. Your Avastar file will be listed in here. You just choose it and click Install from File, and then once you have it installed, like I'll show you where mine is. Here's my Avastar plugin. So once you have it installed, it'll show up here in this window. Make sure you have the check mark on over here in the corner, and that's all you need to do. Then you just click at the bottom of this User Preferences window, click Save User Settings, and then close that out, and your Avastar should show up here as a tab on this left side of the screen where there are tabs, Avastar. So then you have all your rigging tools over here. We don't need to worry about that right now. We are not getting into rigging at all right now. So that's just to give you heads up how to get everything installed that you would be interested in with using for Blender. Anyway, now that we're here in Blender, you should have a cube by default whenever you open a new Blender. We're just going to leave that there for now. I know most videos will tell you to delete the cube and how to res mesh and all that. I'm not going to go there right now. So I'm just going to start with some very, very basics here to hopefully help you get familiar and comfortable with the program before we even get to modeling anything. So when you open Blender, you have this big open space in the middle. This is your 3D viewport. This is where you will be working on mesh. There's a grid. I like to think of some of the tools and layout in Blender as, similar to building in SL. It's the same concept. It's a grid, just like in Second Life, a 3D grid with 3-axis arrows that indicate, which direction your object is placed. So you have an x-axis, which is red, a y, which is green, and a blue, which is z, which is up and down. So it's the same in Second Life. The arrows are the same color, the axis are the same colors, and same concept. So that's a good starting point to keep in mind, that building in Blender is, you can think of it as being similar to building in Second Life. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is interface basics. So again, this is your viewport here in the center. Before I talk about what all of these buttons and menus are, I will point out that if you want to add additional components to your screen and rearrange things, you can do that. If you hover over a divider of a section, you get a double arrow. That is how you can adjust the parts of your interface. And if you want to add an additional window, in the top of every single section of the screen is a little set of diagonal lines like a triangle in the corner. When you hover it, your cursor will turn to a cross. And so when that happens, you can left click and drag either down, or you can left click and drag to the side. However you want to add a new window, you can do that. And sometimes this is helpful if you're wanting to work from different perspectives at the same time on the same object, which I'll go over perspectives and camera views in a bit. So that is a case in which you might want to have multiple windows open of the same, like of your 3D viewport or whatever. Now, if you made a mistake and dragged one of these out and you want to get rid of it, or you're just finished with it, you can hover over the divider and right click until you see join area. Click that and point in the direction of the one you want to get rid of, and click to get rid of that. So you're back to what you had. Over here on the right side, I like to work in a vertical direction with my sections, my panels. So I'll just really quickly, because I'll be going into each of these sections in more detail as we use them in these videos. But I'm going to quickly just tell you what these sections of the screen are. So at the very top, the bar at the top is typical, like any other program. You have your file, which has, new, open, save, export, all of those things, user preferences. And then you have some other windows here, which I won't go into now. You have help, which will link you to, actually, you can get to Avastar website in here. And then, other Blender resources. And then over here you have which mode you're working in Blender in. I won't get into those now. I'm just in Blender render, not cycles. And then you have your version information and all of your specifics about your mesh. So you have like vertices, count, faces, triangles, etc. up there. So whenever you're trying to look at your vertices count to see, like, kind of guesstimate how prim heavy it's going to be or land impact in Second Life, you can keep your eye up here at the top for that information. I'll go over that again at some other point. Then over on the right, you have the outliner. Now I don't pay attention to every single technical term for all of the components of Blender, but I will just tell you the ones that I know, or however I refer to them. So it's the outliner, which shows all of the things that are included in your scene here, from objects to lighting and all of that. So then under that, I have my properties panel, which has these buttons here are where you're going to be doing a lot of work when you do your UV mapping and texturing process. So that will not be covered in this video, not for a couple of videos, but just so you know, the properties are over here. And then over on the left side is all of your main basic functions, like tools, your tools panel. has all of the things you can do to the mesh, like rotate, scale, mirror, duplicate, join, etc. All of that stuff is going to be over here in buttons. So this is how you would get to those functions manually, by finding a button for it. And then another tab here is create, which is to add mesh to the scene. I'm not going to do that just yet, but this is where it's at. These are the buttons for manually adding a piece of mesh to the scene, and you have all these different shapes here, just like an SL, plane, cube, sphere. These should be shapes that you're familiar with if you've ever built in Second Life. So that's where that is, and then you have these other tabs. Some of these I don't use. Animation, physics, I don't use. Grease pencil is something for way later. Then you have an Avastar tab. And this is while you are in object mode. I will talk about object in edit mode in just a second. When you enter edit mode, you have an extra tab here that's called shading. This is where you can do things to the faces of your mesh. So I will talk about that when I get to it. So back to object mode. And then, at the bottom of the screen, you have another bar that's similar to the one at the top with different menus. So you have like view, select, and add, which is to add mesh, and object, which is just things you can do to this object while you're in object mode. Then you have all these different buttons down here, which you can use while you're modeling. Layers. Blender does have layers where the concept is just like in Photoshop or GIMP, where working on layers can keep things separated as you need. So that is something that I use all the time. I will go over layers later. So we will be working a lot with this bar. This bar here with all these buttons is where you will become quickly familiar because of the tools here. So, and then underneath this bar is the timeline for if you're going to do animation. I won't be going over that anytime soon. So those are the basic areas that you're going to be working during the beginning of this series. Okay, so that's all I'm going to spend on the interface. I'll go into details about different parts of the interface as we use them. So now, the first thing I'm going to talk about, well, actually the next thing I'm going to talk about now is navigation basics. You can't just jump into Blender and want to know how to add mesh to the scene or how to even edit mesh until you know how and feel comfortable with the navigating the program. What buttons do what clicks, the shortcuts, how to find things in menus. You should know how to move your camera, everything, all of those basics before you even get into modeling. Spend as much time as you can getting comfortable with these basic things, because that is one of the biggest things I think that will scare people away from the program, is that they simply don't even know where to go, what to do, how to do it. So you need to focus on that first. So again, someone else might teach this a different way. I'm trying to keep it extremely simple and basic because that is the only way that I learned myself. The first part of navigating that I'm going to talk about are mouse functions and camera views, and also some keyboard functions. So to move your camera, as you see I'm doing here, I can look top, bottom, side, around. There is on your keyboard your number pad on the far right where you have all the numbers. If you have a standard regular desktop keyboard, you have like 1 through 9. Whenever you hit a number, like 1 for example, is front view. Your camera is placed in direct front view of the mesh, looking straight forward. If you hit 3, it flips it. If you hit 2, you can see hitting 4, 5, 6, 7 is top view, 8 9, you get all these different views. So you definitely want to play with these while you're modeling to see which angle is best for what you're doing. The ones that the most commonly used views are front view, 5, which is user perspective, and it toggles between, actually whenever you move out of any of the modes, it'll take you back to user perspective, which gives you more freedom to move in how you want. But again, just play with these keys and see what they do for your camera angles. I always like to work in user perspective because sometimes it feels like the view is distorted, unless I want to be an absolute front view, which is good for being precise. So anyway, those are your camera views on the number pad. That's a way to get to those. Also down here in the view menu, on the bottom left of your screen, you have all of these ways to access the camera views also, and it lists the shortcuts here too for what they are, in case you want to do this manually. So that's in the view menu. So, but there are a few more things you can do to move your camera other than just hitting, your camera mode, your view on the number pad. So the way that you can rotate, and like I'm doing now, actually 1 second, let me turn on the screencast keys so that you can see whatever I do. Here at the bottom left, you can see if I hit a certain key or do a certain mouse function. You can pause the video to see what I did if you need to do that. So to rotate your camera around the mesh, it's simply holding the middle mouse wheel on your mouse and turning it side to side. So that's middle mouse wheel, turning it side to side, or up and down, however you want to move. And a lot of online virtual worlds function in the same way. So some of this might be familiar to you if you're a gamer or whatever. Now the way to zoom in or out of your mesh like this is your middle mouse wheel. Just scrolling your middle mouse wheel. And sorry, you can probably hear my dog drinking water. And then if you want to pan the camera, which means that you're not rotating, you're just moving side to side like this, you're going to hold the shift key and hold down your middle mouse button, and that can let you pan around the mesh without rotating up or down. So that's panning. And then if you want to, another way that you can zoom in and out of your mesh at a more of a controlled speed that doesn't just depend on your mouse wheel, is holding the control key and your middle mouse wheel, holding it down. So control and hold middle mouse wheel down. This lets you move in more gradually to zoom in. I like to use this sometimes as well. So those are some of the basics of how to use your mouse. At the end of this video, I'll try to remember to show you where you can change all of these settings to customize them, to choose what buttons do what clicks do what function. If you don't like the default setup, you can change everything. I just stay in the default setup. It's a lot easier, and yeah. So now that you have some basics on how to actually move in this program, practice all of these things first. Become comfortable with turning your camera. Become comfortable with using the shortcuts, the shift and control key in combination with your mouse. And then once you have a good feel for that, we can start with modeling navigation. So I'm going to talk about some ways to use your mouse and keyboard to do something to mesh that is already there. I'm not going to show you how to create or add mesh right now, or how to model anything. I'm just going to show you, like, if there is something here already, how to get into it, how to touch it, what to do with it a little bit on a basic level. So whenever you open a new Blender, you have a default cube. Typically, you would just delete the cube if you don't want it and add your own mesh and start your own project. But right now, we're just going to use this as an example. So by default, you'll be in what's called object mode whenever you open Blender. So object mode is different than edit mode. In object mode, you cannot see or edit the individual vertices or edges or faces of your mesh. It's simply a simple object mode. So you'll see how in which cases we go back and forth between object and edit mode as we do things in Blender. But just know that as soon as you open, you're going to be in object mode, which is it's accessed down here in this bottom bar. You'll see it says object mode. To get into edit mode, you click this menu and you see you have all these other modes. Don't worry about these other ones for now. We're just working with object and edit mode. Go to edit mode. Now this makes your mesh editable. So as you can see, it looks different now. It's orange because it is all highlighted. It's all selected. So that means if I were to move this, everything moves because all of the mesh is selected. So that's edit mode and object mode. If you want to go back to object mode, just click the same menu down there and you can toggle back and forth. There was a time when you could toggle using the tab key, but I don't think that works. Oh, it does work. Okay, so tab. Tab is a shortcut for toggling between edit mode and object mode. Okay, so I'll add that onto the cheat sheet. So the first thing I want to kind of introduce is spacebar. When you hit spacebar and you're modeling, a little search window pops up, and in the search window you can type anything you are looking for that you don't want to go to manually to find the menu for it. Not everything is in here, but a lot of stuff is. So say for example, if I wanted to delete, I could type in delete, and it's going to give me all the options for deleting something in the scene. If you want to just delete the mesh, you would find the one that says mesh and select it. It's going to give you options of what do you want to delete on the mesh. Do you want to delete all of the vertices, which will just delete the entire mesh object? Do you want to delete just edges, faces? You have options here. And once you understand what edges, vertices, and faces are, you will understand how to use the delete options. So just keep in mind that when you do use the delete option, it is going to delete whatever is highlighted. So if I said vertices, edges, or faces, it's going to delete all of those edges, vertices, or faces that are selected in orange. So be careful of that you don't delete mesh that you didn't want to. But if you did, you can hit Control Z. And Control Z is, so let's say for example, I accidentally deleted a face that I didn't want to delete. If I want to undo that, Control Z works just like in any other program. It's the undo function. So that works in Blender as well. So anyway, back to how we started. The whole piece of mesh is highlighted. Again, remember, spacebar is where you can access things. I'll bring it up again later because I use it here and there. Now let's talk a bit about manipulating the mesh a little bit, just very basics. So let's talk about selecting mesh. So the first basic hotkey that you will use all the time is A. A as in apple will toggle between selecting all of the mesh and unselecting all of the mesh. Select and deselect. That's A for all. So keep that in mind. Now, yeah, so that's A for that. Next, I want to talk about the different parts of the mesh. There are 3 parts of the mesh that you can manipulate. Those are vertices, edges, and faces. So to show you those 3 different things, at the bottom of, if you zoom in here closely so you can see, at the bottom of the window here, there are 3 buttons. If you hover over a button, it will tell you what it is. So the first one is Vertex Select. So Vertex Select is, vertices are the dots. Basically, to put it in simple terms, they are the dots and points on a mesh. So if I right click on this vertice up here on this corner of the box, the cube, that is a vertice. So when I do something, it'll affect only that point or dot on the mesh cube. So I'm just moving this back and forth. I will show you how to move something in a minute, not right now. So I'm going to undo that. So each point, so since this is a simple cube, we haven't added any extra edges or lines. It's only going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 vertices, just like, because it's, it's a cube. So there will be a point at each corner. So we only have 8 vertices here so far. And to edit an individual vertice, again, you have to be in vertice select mode, which means you click that vertice button, vertice select button at the bottom of the bar here. So keep that in mind, because there will be times that you are wondering why you can't select a point and you're only selecting an edge or a face. Check that you're in vertice select mode. And I don't know why that's not undoing. But, okay, so then next to the vertice select button is the edge select button. So click that if you want to select only edges. So in edge select mode, you will not be able to select vertices individually. You're just going to be selecting edges of the cube, which I hope you can see are highlighted in white as I select them. So this enables you to move an edge of the mesh, like that. And then at the bottom here, next to edge select mode, is face select mode. So you click that. And this is right click, by the way, if I didn't mention. You're right clicking to select these parts of the mesh, vertices, edges, and faces. Right click on your mouse and you can select individual faces around the mesh. So to move a whole face of mesh, you make sure in face select mode, and then it will just move the faces. So these are 3 buttons you will constantly be using, constantly be switching back and forth between. So yeah, and then if you want to select multiple parts of the mesh at once, it works the same way it does in SL or any other program when you want to select multiple items at the same time. You would just hit, so you would select your first thing. So say I want to select my face here and I want to select the face next to it. I will hold the shift key. Shift key adds to your selection. So holding shift and right click the second face, I have 2 faces selected. So if I want to add a third face on top here, I continue to hold shift and right click on the top face. Now I have these 3 faces selected. So that is how you do multiple selections. Let's see it in vertices mode. So go down to vertex select here. We'll click the vertex select button, and now I'm going to choose that vertice, hold shift, choose that one, hold shift, and choose the bottom one. Now I have these 3 vertices selected at the same time, and they will move together or edit together. So that is how to select multiple parts at the same time. Shift key. Now, there's another way to select individual parts of the mesh in edit mode, and that is while you are in, I usually use it in face select mode. It will work in the other modes, but it's easier for me when I want to select like a certain face or portion of the mesh. Let's see. So let me make two cubes here. I'm just going to drag a copy, which I will talk about copy in a minute. So now, let's say I'm in this scene here and I'm editing, and I have two pieces of mesh in this scene, and I don't want, see, if I hit A back in the beginning where we talked about A for select all, deselect all, it's going to select all the mesh in the edit scene. But what if I only want to select one of these pieces of mesh, one of the cubes? So the way to do that is make sure you have everything deselected, which is A, and then hover your mouse cursor over the piece of mesh that you want to select. Keep it hovered there and hit the L key, L. So that will select whatever piece of mesh is under your cursor, if it's a separate object. We'll talk more about that later, about what is considered, selectable parts of a piece of mesh. But that gives you the basic idea of doing that, and that was the L key. So that's another way to get that selected. Now, I'm going to talk about moving the mesh. So let me hover over this right cube with my mouse, hit L to select just that, and then I'll just say the shortcut now. X is to delete. X is the shortcut to pull up the delete menu. I'm going to hit vertices because I want to get rid of everything there. So I'll go over that again later. So now I just have my one cube, but what if I want to move the cube along the grid? So again, I'm going to hit A to select all to get this cube selected. There are a couple ways you can move. The first basic way that you would be more familiar with if you build in Second Life is once you have it selected, just left click and drag along any of the colored arrows. So right now I'm moving it along the green Y axis. And that's just a left click on the colored arrow of the axis that you want to move along. And then to rotate, I'm holding my middle mouse button down, middle mouse wheel down, rotate, so I can see the red X axis if I want to move it along the red X axis. If I want to drag it up, I can grab the blue Z axis, which is up and down. So that works similar to in Second Life when you're moving a prim around in Second Life. Same thing. Now, to do this without using the mouse, the shortcut is G for grab. G for grab. As soon as you hit G, you can move this anywhere with your cursor. If you want to cancel it, because you don't want to do that, hit the right mouse click. Right mouse click will cancel the movement. If you hit G and you move it with your mouse and you want it in a certain place, you hit left click to confirm, and it will leave the object right there. So that was G for grab, move it around, and right click to cancel if you don't want to do that. G for grab, move it around, and left click to confirm if you want to keep the new position. Now, if you want to move along a certain axis, let's say that I only want to keep my movement restricted to the green Y axis. When I hit G, I'm going to hit Y on my keyboard. That will only let me move with my mouse, move my object along the green Y axis. So again, right click to cancel, that's G for grab, and then immediately hit Y. So you're not doing anything in between, you're just hitting G, Y, and then you're going to be able to move along that axis. If you want to do G, Z, it'll just keep it restricted to up and down. Right click to cancel because I don't want to keep that. So, and then again, of course, if you want to hold down middle mouse button, rotate, and move it along the red X axis, that would be G and then X. to move it along the X. So right click to cancel. That is how you can move your object. If you have, now I'm in face select mode here at the bottom. So if I only wanted to move a vertice instead of the whole object or a whole face, deselect, come down here to the select modes, click the first one, vertex select mode, then I'll just right click to select a vertice that I want, and I can do the same thing. I can move along the arrows like you saw me do before, or I can hit G and move it manually like this with the cursor. That's G for grab, and it will only move that vertice because I'm on vertex select mode. Or you can use the shortcuts G, Y to move it only along the green Y axis. Same thing in any select mode. You can move things the same way. Okay, so that's how to move a piece of mesh. So get comfortable with that first. That's the biggest thing you want to get comfortable with, because how can you edit a piece of mesh if you're not comfortable with moving the vertices, moving the edges, moving the faces, moving the whole object? Now when you are in object mode, so if you come down here, we are in edit mode because we've been editing the parts of the mesh. When you go back into object mode down here, you can still use these move functions. So you can still move your object. The only difference is when you're in object mode, it's going to treat your mesh as if it's one simple object and you're not able to move individual parts of the mesh. So I cannot access my vertices or my edges or faces individually here in object mode. So that's why you don't see the buttons down there. So when you want to edit those, you make sure you're in edit mode. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how to move a piece of the mesh, just like we just did, but let's say that you want to do it in a different orientation. So let me just show you what I mean. Sometimes if you have a piece of mesh and it is rotated or at an angle, I'll just show you an example. So let's say that on my model I have my mesh is like this, and I still want to move a face or vertice with accuracy along a certain axis. Sometimes this is tricky to do, it's not so easy, and sometimes if it's simple enough, you can do it, you might be able to do it. So this is just what I've learned. This is the way that I figured it out for myself, and it works for me sometimes, and then other times it doesn't work so easily. So my mesh is rotated, and I will talk about rotate in a little bit. So at the bottom of the screen you have your select mode buttons. If I'm in face select mode, say for example that I want to move this top face here a certain direction, but you know, if I were to drag it on the Y, because it's rotated, it doesn't move exactly how I might want it to move. So I can come down here, and where it says global, there's a little menu here that has these options. These are the orientations for your arrows, which are called the manipulator, meaning that, you know, these are the arrows that manipulate parts of your mesh. So you can change the orientation. Right now it's just going to adhere to the grid, the orientation of the grid. And if you want to, you can change that to say normal, for example, and when you change that to normal, it's going to make it more local to this particular face, to the orientation, the angle of this individual face instead of the whole grid. So each face on a piece of mesh, it can be referred to as having normals. I'll get into that later. Basically, it's like whatever direction your faces are facing on the mesh. So when you hear normals, it's going to have something to do with the direction of your mesh, like your faces. So when I have my manipulator set to normal orientation, again, it's going to align itself with the direction and angle of the face, or the normal. So this can be a way to edit on that rotated axis. So if I want to move it like this and not lose the shape and not have it distorted, I can just grab the corresponding arrow with that direction I want to move the face in. So that can be helpful. When you do this with grab, I don't think it works the same way. Let's see, if I do G and Z, yeah, it's not going to work the same way. I find that, and unless I'm missing something here, it really only works if you move the mesh with the manipulator, the arrows, manually. And that's left click on the manipulator to move, left click on the arrow to move. So that is how to change the orientation. There are a couple other ones here that you can play with. I usually only use normal or global. Normal or global. So, but you can play with the different ones to see if you can get what you want. That's a basic overview of that function. Now, I'm going to actually I'm just going to leave it here rotated. So that's how to move your mesh, okay, in the different parts of your mesh. Again, practice this part as much as you can. Next, I'm going to show how to make a copy of a piece of mesh. So if I want to get a second copy of this object, make sure that you hit A to select all, or if you're using the L function to select this particular part of the mesh. You can be in any view when you do this, whatever works for you. Once it's all selected, you're going to hit Shift and D. Shift and D, and then you're going to move out the copy. And this will let you place it wherever you want on the grid. It's free form right now. So I can place it there if I want, which was just a left click to confirm. If that's not what I wanted to do, I can do it again. I can hit Control Z, or I could have hit X to delete that, and I can do it again. So Shift and D, drag it out, and left click to confirm. Shift and D, drag it out, or right click to cancel. But it did still make the copy, so be careful when you're using this function, because sometimes you can end up with duplicates that you don't see. And there's a way to check for doubles and stuff like that I'll show you later. So I'm gonna hit X to delete the vertices of that because I don't want it. So again, all to select all. Now if I want to drag my copy out on a certain axis, and again, this works just like in Second Life. There is this, to make a copy of a prim, you hit Shift and drag out along the arrow that you want to drag out on, the axis that you want. And it's the same way in here. So it's just that you do Shift and D. So what I'm going to do is I want to move it out, let's say along, to keep it accurate and aligned to the green y-axis. I'm going to hit Shift and D, and then I'm going to hit Y to tell it to move it along the y-axis only. So again, that's Shift and D to make the copy, and then Y. Immediately hit Y, and then you can drag it out along the y-axis. Now, if I want to move it along, okay, I only have one copy there. The up and down, the blue Z-axis, Shift and D to make the copy, and then hit Z for the blue axis to go up and down. And then if I want to choose that, I hit left click to confirm, and then I have my new copy made. So X to delete all of that. Again, that's Shift and D, and then if I hit Z, I can drag it up or down, only along the Z-axis, and left click to confirm if I want to keep it there. Okay, so that's how to copy an object, a simple way to do that. So, okay, I was just looking at something. Again, I'll have all of these shortcuts on the cheat sheet. Now I want to quickly jump over to object mode. So at the bottom here in the menu, choose object mode, or remember you can use tab to get into object mode. Don't forget the tab key. I want to talk about how to separate and join mesh pieces of the mesh scene. So if I only have one object here in my mesh scene, so I can't really join this to anything because there's nothing else to join it to. But let's say that I made my copy of my cube, and so I have two pieces of mesh here in the scene. Let's say that I want to, let's do separate first. Let's say I want to put this second cube in its own object mode. So there might be a reason you want to do that. Maybe you want these pieces to be separately linked in Second Life, because if you upload this as it is with both pieces in the same edit mode, when you go to export this to Second Life, it's going to upload as one object. So there will be no linked parts. This will just be considered one object. So if I want to break this up so that these can each be separately linked in SL, so I could move them separately or edit them separately, this is how to separate a piece of mesh. So in object mode, I'm going to select only the piece of mesh that I want to separate away from the rest of the scene. So to do that, I'm going to hover my mouse over, and I'm in face select mode, but it'll work in the other ones. It just might be a little more tricky. So I'm going to hover my mouse cursor over the object that I want to separate, and then I want to hit L. The L key will select all of this cube. Okay, so now that's ready to separate. So now that I have hit L, I'm going to hit P and that's P for separate. So, and then it's going to give me some options here. I just want to choose by selection. So I want to tell it to separate the object based on the selection that I made. So everything that's orange. So now it's a separate object. So to see that, I'm going to tab over to object mode and right click to select. And you can see they are separate objects now. They will upload to SL as separately linked objects, prims. Okay. Now let's say that here I have these two objects in object mode that I want to join into the same piece of mesh. So I want to reverse this idea. To get two pieces joined, you're going to right click to select one and then hold shift to select the second one. They're both selected, and then over in the left side of the screen in the tools panel there will be a join button. Just hit the join button, or the shortcut is Control J. Control J for join, or in the left tools panel find the join button and it will do it that way. So then when I hit tab over to edit mode, or come down here and go back to edit mode, the two pieces of mesh are one object now. They're in one editing scene. So that's how to separate and join mesh, which you might do for various reasons. So that's pretty much it for this portion of Blender Basics, the interface, the navigation. Just keep the cheat sheet handy, because there's no way you're going to remember all of the shortcuts that were mentioned in the video just off the top of your head after seeing it one time. I mean, replay the video if you need to, but use your cheat sheet and keep that handy until you're memorizing these functions. Do them over and over again with just a simple cube first, or a simple plane, until you have them memorized and they feel comfortable and they feel almost like second nature. Before you are ready to move on to modeling, get this part comfortable first. I and do it every day, practice it daily all the time, because if you go and practice all this and you say, okay, this looks easy, I have this down, and then you disappear from Blender for a month or two, you're not going to remember what you were doing. And so that's a problem a lot of people have, is that they will learn everything and start feeling comfortable with it, and then they, for whatever reason, can't continue to learn, and they disappear from the program, and then they come back to it and they're back at square one again, where they're frustrated and they have to relearn everything all over again. The only way that I have been able to get anything from this program has been to use it as often as possible. Sometimes I'm using it daily. So that's just a reality of using Blender and creating mesh, whether it's Blender, Maya, whatever program. This is the free program. This is one that is widely used, but it doesn't matter what program you're in. If you are dedicated to getting something out of these programs to create for SL, you need to commit yourself to practice regularly, regular practice, without breaks, without, maybe a day at the most, a day or two if you can do that, if your memory is really good. But that's the only way to do this, the only way. So I hope this helped, at least at a basic level. The next video will go over more, a bit more advanced functions of what you can do to your mesh, and going over the interface again. So stay tuned for the next video.